Hello, everyone. It's the Psalmist here. So, actually, what do I mean when I say that atheism is actually a disability, an impairment? It's very important to first, lay down the ground so that we can all have understanding, because this could be a very hot debate. What is a disability? So we all have to be on the same ground of what a disability actually is, so that when I make the explanation, you could logically, listen, and with critical thinking, you know, try to comprehend what I am telling you. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, disability is a physical or mental condition that makes someone unable to act in a way that is considered usual for most people. So I wanted to use a dictionary that will come from an academic institution, so that when I say that atheism is actually a disability, it could make sense, because you will find atheists who have studied at Cambridge. In truth, like I said, that atheism, or scientists who believe in atheism, that there is no God, are actually disabled and impaired. You see, so I would first like to say that the Christian man actually has a great advantage over the atheist. The religious person has an advantage over the atheist. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that, when you're a Christian, you have two capacities. The first capacity is the intellectual capacity, which the atheist and the scientists who deny the existence of God also have. And then the Christian also has another capacity, which the atheist or the scientist who believe that there is no God does not have. You see, he has the spiritual capacity. So that means that the Christian, the religious person, has the capacity to comprehend spiritual things. And he also has the capacity to comprehend intellectual things, which are interpreted by the brain. But the atheist or the scientist who believe that there is no God does not have such a capacity. So what that means is that the atheist or the scientist who believe that there is no God actually cannot comprehend anything beyond what is material, anything beyond what he can see with his eyes, or with something that can help his eyes see further than the eyes can see. Outside of that, he cannot comprehend anything. How can that not be a disability? I'm going to give you an example. The first example, I want to make it, it's a scientific example which scientists will understand and relate to. If you were to take clean water, just clean water from tap water, you show it to a person, you say, look at this water, look at how clean this water is, and they agree it is clean water. It is even drinkable water. But you tell them that actually in this water, there is microorganisms living in this water, and some of them are mercilessly murdering one another. You see, and then the person say, "Ah, come on, it's impossible. This water is clean. You can see it's transparent. You can see the bottom of the bowl, or the bottom of the cup, or the bottom of the glass which contains the water." But you say, "But I'm telling you, there is, microorganisms in this water." You see, what I'm trying to establish here is that you have a person who have knowledge, and they have the capacity, not necessarily their own capacity. They could have had maybe aided capacity, so they could see that this microorganism in the water in the form of a microscope. And then this one who does not know about a microscope, who has never seen a microscope, does not believe that the water could actually have organisms in it. And then you say, okay, you don't believe when I'm telling you that the water has microorganism in it. He says, yes, it's impossible. You're stupid. You're crazy. This is just lunacy. And then you take a microscope and you take a sample of water and you show him, or you just, today the technology today can just, project whatever the microscope is recording over a screen on a PC, and you show them, look at that. And then they will see that, okay, so this is the water, it has microorganisms in it. You see, so this person will be able, without the microscope, they are disabled. So they will be in denial of the existence of any living thing inside clean water. So when you take the microscope and show them and say, see, so they become sins, they become enabled. So they will believe when you tell them that clean water does have living organisms in it. Another example will be that, if you were to take a blind man, a man who has never seen anything in his life, born blind, and then this man, of course, has come to an understanding that, when the sun is out, it is warm or it is hot. So he has comprehension of what, the sun does when it comes up. So one day you walk out of him, out of the house, walk out with him out of the house, and you tell him, oh, the sun is out. That's why it's warm, or that's why it's hot. So he agrees with you that the sun is out. But you tell him that at the same time, the moon is also out. And he's like, what's a moon? You say, well, a moon is like more like the sun, but it does not have the same, it does not emit the same amount of heat as the sun. And probably the moon does not even emit any kind of heat. But the moon does emit light just like the sun. But the light of the moon is much less and less bright than that of the sun. And then this man who was born blind tells you that there is no such a thing. You're lying. You're crazy. You're mad. You just like to invent things. There's no such a thing as a moon. So what you will have to do is that you will have to find ways to make this man to be able to see. The same way as a man who cannot believe that clean water has microorganisms in it was given a microscope so that they could be enabled, so that their disability can be cured, so that when they were not believing, they could be believing. He said, you're going to have to find a way to make him see. But the problem is that there is no way of making him see. Do you see that? There's no way that you can make him, because he has never seen in his life, unless you're Christ, unless you're God, or unless you're a man filled with the Spirit of God who can make a miracle so that this man can see. Until you can make him see that there is a moon out at the same time with the sun, which is a fact, because it has happened before. In fact, we have seen an eclipse. So until you do that, this man is going to argue and argue and argue forever and forever. So that's exactly what happens in atheist versus Christian debates, in which the discussion just goes on and on. And even if the Christian was to make points which are valid, which can be validated, it does not mean that the atheist is going to believe. Why? Because he cannot comprehend God. He doesn't have the abilities to. Why? Because he's disabled. Because he only has the intellectual capacity. He does not have the spiritual capacity which would have enabled him and cure him of his disability by making him see and comprehend God. Because in these videos of Christians and atheists, debating, you will find one video on YouTube saying that Christian versus atheist debate, atheist wins. So when you watch, you do hear that, well, the atheist does actually make some valid points. But does that mean that just because an atheist is making valid points, does that actually mean that there is no God? Of course not. It does not prove anything. It does not prove anything beyond reasonable doubt. A Christian cannot be convinced just because Richard Dawkins has made some valid points. Do you see that? So you're going to find a video again which says that, Christian versus atheist debate, Christian wins. Does that mean that the atheist will stop believing in what he believes, that there is no God, upon the evidence that he believes that scientists have presented as proof that there is no God? Is he going to believe? Of course not. So this debate is just going to go on. So actually it means that all these debates about there is no God, there's between Christians and atheists, are just useless debate. Really, seriously, they are useless because no one is gonna be, convinced. No atheist gonna be convinced that God exists over a debate, and no Christian is gonna stop believing in God over a debate. You see, a Christian can stop believing in God because he was raised through, the education system, which takes away the minds of God from man. You see, and then an atheist can say that in the very same way, a person can be Christian because they were born from Christian parents and they weren't church. That is also true. But what takes away, what makes the Christian much more valid is that the Bible says that do not just believe what other people are telling you. You must, for yourself, know God. You see, Jesus says that at the end, in the judgment, people are going to come to him claiming to know him. And he's going to say that, I do not know you. What does that mean? He means that even a Christian should not believe in a teaching or in a doctrine or in what the pastor said. He must know God for himself. But when it comes to atheism, a lot of atheists and scientists will believe that there's no God. Actually, the statements that they make in support of what they believe, they've never proved them for themselves. What do I mean by that? When a microbiologist, a scientist like Richard Dawkins says that, the way the universe is, it's impossible that it could just come out of an explosion and be a mistake. It has to be intellectually designed. But guess what does he say? He says that it's not God. It has to be an alien. So no scientist is coming up and say, but Richard, Mr. Dawkins, come on. How do you know that this designer, this intelligent designer, is not God? How can you conclude that it's not him? And because he's a scientist, he's supposed to bring supporting evidence that, and tangible scientific evidence, which must prove that indeed it will be impossible that the design of the universe and the creation of it, the construction and the maintenance of it could have came from God. You see, but scientists don't do that. They just believe that because Richard Dawkins says something or Stephen Hawking says something, it is true. The same way as some Christians who have faith over the fact that their parents are Christian. Richard Dawkins once said that there is no such a thing as a Christian child, but a child of Christian parents. This is true. You see, just because he's an atheist does not mean that he cannot make something about Christianity which is true. And he also said that a lot of Christians don't read the Bible, which is true. If Christians read the Bible, they will not be misled. They will not be taking their heart and money to make the pastor rich, because that's what not the Bible teaches. So this man is, even though he's making those facts in attack of Christianity, in attack of God, in attack of Scripture. But what he's saying is true. His intentions are not good. You see, but what he's saying is true. And if you are an objective Christian, a real Christian, you cannot deny what he's saying. You can deny his intent, which is to prove that there is no God. But you cannot deny that what he's saying in terms of Christians not reading the Bible and children not being, Christian children, but children of Christian parents. You cannot deny that that is a fact. So the point I'm trying to make here is that there will be things that atheists will say about Christianity or about God, which will be facts. But it does not mean that it proves that, their worldview that there is no God. You understand? So the thing that we can do as Christians, because it will be unchristlike to say that, because like I've said, that these debates are actually useless because they will never convert an atheist. They will never most likely convert an atheist into a Christian or into a believer in God. What we can do is take what the Bible teaches, the laws of God, and take them and show to the atheist and the scientist that when you remove this which God has taught as a way to build a society, a nation, a civilization, and a family, you're going to have lawlessness and disorder and violence and self-destruction. What do I mean by that? Well, of course, the atheists and the scientists would like to believe that without the laws of God, they could build a society which has peace and order. This is impossible. Why? Because for every society to have peace and order, there must at least be it must at least be a moral society. But there's one problem. Morality is not from evolution. Morality is rooted on the laws that God has given. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, think about an immoral person. An adulterer is an immoral person. Why is an adulterer an immoral person? Because he or she has transgressed the law of God. Thou shalt not commit adultery. A liar is immoral. Why? Because he or she has transgressed the law of God. Thou shalt not give false testimony. Thou shalt not spread a false report. A murderer is immoral. Why is that? Because a murderer has transgressed the law of God. So do you see that? So you see that even the thing that is supposed to maintain a society, even a secular society, you will need to have morals. The laws are meant to instill morals in the human being. Without the law, you can't have morals. You see, so an atheist, if you were to show him that removal of this will lead to an immoral and self-destructive society. God says that marriage should be between a man and a woman, a male and a female. That's what God has said. So if in an atheistic society, because there is no God, that means there is no law of God. But an atheist society, which is like a transition from a secular society, which had some of the laws of God, in their laws, will for a while be moral. But as time passes, what's going to happen is that someone is going to want to marry their dog. And then because the atheists who come from a secular society which had laws which were still rooted in God's laws, they would say, no, you can't marry a dog, man. And then the man says, why? And then they say, but no, it's wrong. And then the man says, but who decided that it's wrong? And who does he think that he is, that he can tell us what is wrong and what is right? You see, that's where the problem comes from. That's where the immorality is going to come in. Because now you have no ground, no basis to say that a man cannot marry a dog and have sexual intercourse with it and have offspring with it. You understand? Because if you're going to say that it's wrong and they're questioning the very basis of you saying that you're wrong, eventually you're going to have to say because God says so. But the problem is that you don't believe in God. So eventually the man who wants to marry a dog and have offspring with that dog, he's going to say that your law of saying that marriage is between a man and a woman and a man and a man and a woman and a woman is unconstitutional. It's oppressive. I'm not breaking any law. I'm not hurting anyone. Why then am I not allowed to marry my dog? You understand? So you're going to have no choice. Depending on how much support this man can gather to himself, he will get this law passed that he can marry his dog. That's how you get immorality. And then it's going to be other things. And it's going to get worse and worse. Why? Because you were disabled to comprehend God. You are disabled to see that what God says is good. You see, a lot of people like to say God is violent, God is blood hungry and all that. But they don't realize that if God created the universe, it means that he must regulate it and maintain it the same way as a state is regulated by its laws. A criminal is judged and sentenced according to the laws that are in the state or in a country. So if the whole universe was a country and God was king and judge, so it means that he will deal with sin in the way that only a God, almighty, powerful God can do. So whatever he's going to do is going to be devastating. The same way as in some countries, when you commit crime, You can be killed by lethal injection. You can be killed by a firing squad. You can be killed by electrocution. That is what that country believes that is the way that they deal with sin, crime. Crime, sin is the same thing. You see, that's how they believe that they can show their might, their power. So God also, when he deals with sin, he does it in such a way that it is absolutely scary to the one who's watching, that they will be afraid to break the law of God. The same way as an earthly judge sentence a criminal who has transgressed the law of a state or the law of a country in such a way that it scares the would-be criminals. If you're an objective atheist or an objective scientist, you would understand why God deals with sin in such a way that it is devastating. You see, when God destroyed the Canaanites, he sentenced them, he judged them for their immorality and for their murdering of their own kids to sacrifice to their false gods. I mean, in the modern society, if someone was killing their child for success, for harvest, for whatever, would they not be arrested? They would be arrested and they'll be dealt with in accordance with the law of their country. And then they'll be punished in accordance with the power and the might of that country. So if it is God, he's going to have to judge, sentence, and punish according to his own laws, according to his almighty power. So if you're objective, you understand why God will have to really be angry and against sin and talk about how much damage he's going to do to those who have transgressed his law according to his own power, according to his almighty power. So, but if an atheist can be enabled the same way as a man who cannot see that clean water has microorganisms in it by giving him a microscope and show him that there is actually, microorganisms in the water. If an atheist cannot be enabled, he's going to keep arguing. You see, but the way that I'm showing that if you were to take the application of the law of God, if you were to take the application of what the Bible teaches and showed him that if you want an atheistic society without God, you will have no law. And then without law, what do you get? Chaos. Without chaos, and in chaos, you cannot get peace. And the atheist himself will be crying about the chaos that he has caused by saying that there is no God and removing what the Bible teaches. You understand that? So to be an atheist is not something that people have to boast about, and because sometimes you'll hear people, I'm an atheist. I said, but why? Why are you an atheist? Well, scientists have proved that there's no God. And when they say it with such swagger that it's a cool thing, that it's a clever thing, it's a wise thing. But what they don't realize that it's a disability. You are disabled. You don't have the capacity to comprehend God. I'm gonna give one last example about why an atheist is incapacitated, that he is disabled and impaired, and believing that there is no God is not something that should be looked up to, is a disability. Think about a child who asks his parents, where do children come from? And the parents tell him that, you know what happens, son? Me and your mother, maybe it's me, I say my son, me and your mother, we go into the room, and then in the room we have sex. And then during the sex, what happens is that my sperm comes out of me and goes into your mother. And then after that, your mother has eggs in her, and then they mix with the sperm and they form a baby. And this baby grows, after months and months, after 9 months, it will be a full-grown baby. And then the baby will be ready to be born. And the baby is born, and that's how children are made. And the son is like, oh, come on, Dad, there's no such a thing. Well, the thing about a son being in denial that children are produced by sexual intercourse is that he's going to grow up to see it for himself, then he's going to believe. The problem with an atheist is that he's like a child. But the problem with an atheist is that he's like a child who refuses to grow. A child cannot comprehend what I've just said about how a baby is made, because he does not have the capacity to do so. So that means he's disabled, like an atheist is disabled. But a child, when he grows up, becomes enabled to understand this kind of things. So he believes what his parents were telling him when he was younger. So like a man who gets given a microscope, he becomes enabled. Then he believes. So an atheist, because he's in denial and he does not have the capacity to comprehend what is immaterial, then he does not believe. And then he not only does not believe, he builds institutions in which he's coming up with all these theories, all these assumptions. But he teaches them as if they were facts, even though he himself, being a scientist, has never proved them. But the point he's trying to do is that he's using his influence, because science has greater influence even than politics. Because most of the things that we have, that we enjoy from medicine, technology, transportation, is was done by science. So that gives science a lot of power and a lot of influence. So they are using that power and influence to convince everyone that their worldview is true, and the worldview of the religious people or the Christians, who may not necessarily have invented anything or given the world anything to enjoy or to use to make their life easier, then these Christians cannot be telling the truth, because they don't have that kind of power. You understand? So that's where their power comes from. So they are able to be believed because they have made their system, this system, sort of a technocratic scientific system in which everywhere when you look, it's scientific discovery, scientific invention, it's scientific ingenuity. But it does not mean that when they say that it's not God, it's true. But when you have powerful people, sometimes no one questions them. In the same vein, when I'm saying that, people like Stephen Hawking don't get questioned because they are powerful, because of the works that they've done, because of the reputation that they've built over years. If you think about what Stephen Hawking said about, there is he says that out of our solar system, there is intelligent life, but it's not God. But no scientist is saying, how do you know? Can you prove to us? Can you show us? But because he's Stephen Hawking, you cannot question Stephen Hawking. That's where the fall comes from. So people just believe, just because a personality who's reputable, who's an expert in a certain field, they believe that he can't say something wrong. But the problem is that maybe he can't say something wrong in terms of the cosmos. Maybe, Richard Dawkins can't say anything in terms of microbiology. But when it comes to God, he doesn't know what he's talking about. You see, so you have to be able to differentiate that a lawyer who studied at Harvard, has a PhD in law, cannot go into a surgeon, a theater where someone is being operated, want to claim that he can say anything. He doesn't know anything about heart surgery. The same way as a microbiologist doesn't know anything about God. He doesn't have the capacity to do so, because when you go to school, you are being capacitated, you are being enabled, you are being taught. You see, so even the atheist, when he reads the Bible, even though he's been taught, but because it's not just the words which makes the person believe, it is the Spirit of God who enters the person, enabling him, giving him a capacity to comprehend that the words are true. So an atheist can read the Bible and see everything that is written, but still deny that what the Bible says is true. Why? Because he is disabled. You see? So that's how I came to the conclusion that atheists and scientists who believe there is no God are disabled. But of course, for the sake of discussions and argument, people are going to argue that, but if you were to think of what a disability is, and then think about an atheist who denies God, because an atheist believes that everything is intellectual, everything is material, because the intellectual mind is actually a physical brain. You see, so it's in the brain, it's physical. You can actually open my skull up and look at the brain. That's where everything is done. But the spiritual capacity is something that is not tangible. But a man can have it. People have had it for thousands of years. And an atheist comes along and say that, well, you're wrong. I'm not saying that just because something has been believed for thousands of years is correct. I'm just saying that, but you have to consider and ponder upon that, for thousands of years, people have believed this. What makes me not to be able to believe in it? Is it because I have facts? Or is it because I don't have the capacity to understand what they're saying? Do the atheists and the scientists have facts? No, what they have is theories and assumptions that there is intelligent design, but it's not God. And they also assume that, like in the case of Stephen Hawking, he assumes that there is intelligent life outside of our solar system. But he makes another assumption to say that it's not God. But he says it as if it's a fact. You see why? Because he does not have the capacity to understand. But as a Christian, I have the capacity to understand science. That's why I'm able to question science, because I have the same intellectual capacity as a scientist. I might not be an expert in microbiology or the cosmos, but if somebody was to just tell me that, the universe, the way that it is, has to be intelligently designed, but the designer cannot be God. I mean, you don't have to study science to be able to say, but how do you know? It's a scientific question which does not really need you to study science to question. You see, so science, when it comes to God, it becomes unscientific. They make a lot of assumptions. Could have been, should have been. Because when they tell you about how the universe came into being, they tell you how there could have been forces who work together. There could have been an explosion. The reason why they say they could have been because they can't prove it. CGI images proves nothing. We can make a CGI image of heaven where the heavenly hosts are worshiping God. Will that be a fact? Of course not. It will be just taking the words that are written in the Bible and making them sort of an image. You see, but scientists are able to make CGI images of the universe coming into being and telling you that this happened billions of years ago. So you're looking at the video, you're looking at the explosion taking place, the cooling of the earth. They even tell you that from the day that the earth was like molten lava, they tell you how long it took for it to cool, even though it's estimation, but it's still the same thing. But who saw this thing? Nobody has seen it. But yet they tell you as if it's a fact, as if they've seen it. That is because they have to keep doing this thing so that they could support their theory that there is no God. Only because they don't have the capacity to know him or to comprehend him or to even speak to him. The same way as a man who has never seen microorganisms in clean water does not have the capacity to see that there's microorganisms in the water until he's given a microscope. So that is all that I have to say about the topic. Why atheism is actually a disability. It's not something that to be celebrated over, or something that people must look to become because you are disabled. So if you have any comment, you can leave them below. And if you like this kind of content that I give you today, you can subscribe to my channel so you can receive this kind of comment. This kind of content. Thank you for listening.